I'm not even going to ask you if you've had a good weekend because clearly it hasn't been a good weekend, especially for us West Ham United fans that were kind of hoping maybe our fortunes might change in the game against Brighton at the weekend. But it was not meant to be. Now, Graham Potter's return to football management isn't going quite how he or anyone else would have expected it to do. I think many of us thought that the season would somehow fizzle out under Potter. Nothing too exciting, nothing too exceptional. Just plain old boring Potter, emulating what Moyes does by winning the odd game, drawing the odd game, and losing the odd game. And I guess many of us thought would drift towards mid-table mediocrity, maybe stay on 14th place, maybe 13th or even 15th place, where we were for most of the season. And we'll just end up looking forward to tweaking the squad in the summer and go again next season. But I don't think many of us really expected the season to climax into what has become quite farcical and quite disappointing. Just 3 wins under Graham Potter's reign. It's cast doubt even further as to whether he's the right man for the job. Now, the doubt before was whether Potter was the right man to get us back into the top half of the table, to get us into Europe. Now the doubt is whether he's actually going to be able to keep us in the Premier League next season. But in some ways, perhaps what's happening at the moment is probably a blessing in disguise and can act as a wake-up call to everybody at the club. What I saw in Brighton's victory on Saturday was that the team spirit that they've got is severely lacking at West Ham United. If you're new to this channel, by the way, if it's the first time you're watching the West Ham Voice, or if you've watched before but yet to become a subscriber, please do consider subscribing. Costs nothing to subscribe. All the content is free. But even if you don't subscribe, if you enjoy the content, please do hit the like button at the end of this video. So on the game, they deservedly went a goal ahead in the first half. And even when we had our purple patch and not only got our equaliser, but deservedly went ahead, Brighton simply just didn't give up. And even when they got their equaliser, the Brighton team still had that belief, that hunger to keep pushing forward. Now, as for us, we dropped deeper and deeper, desperately trying to keep hold of what we had and in order to try and keep the opposition at bay. But yet again, we fell short in the dying minutes of the game and not conceded just 1 goal this time, but conceded 2. And yet again, nothing to demonstrate, nothing to show at the end of the game. Now, what seems to be really missing at West Ham right now is that huge amount of belief. And I'm asking myself whether there is that lack of team spirit or whether it's just something more deeper, more psychological that we just simply don't think we can win. So when I say perhaps what's happening is a blessing in disguise, maybe now we can stop kidding ourselves that we're anywhere near being a good team. We've got an awful lot of good players, but we're not a good team. Now, of course, it's the manager's role to turn these players into a good team, into a good, coherent team. It's the manager's job to galvanize the players into a cohesive unit. But alas, we have too many individuals who want to showcase to bigger teams what they're capable of doing rather than playing as part of a team for a whole season or at this moment in time for a whole 90 minutes. And herein lies the problem. Brighton played as a team. West Ham United did not. Now, many are also saying, well, it's Potter. He doesn't know how to manage these big players, these big name players. And he proved that when he was at Chelsea, and he's proven that again at West Ham. Sure, he seems to have gotten the best out of Lucas Paqueta for a while in order to play better, but he's still, trying to get the best out of the likes of Kudus and others who seem to have maybe regressed. But have they regressed only under him? Well, I'm not sure. We go back to almost a year and a half ago when the second half of our season imploded under David Moyes, and players like Kudus, Alvarez, Paqueta, even Bowen for a while were just not being consistent enough. Then, of course, Lopetegui came, and we all blamed him for the continued inconsistency and for the absolute nightmare that he was in terms of the way he managed the team. But now we have Potter, and again, we're blaming the head coach for the fact that the players are not delivering. Well, maybe, just maybe, the players themselves need to really ask whether they are actually giving their all. Look, I'm not suggesting for a minute that Potter is absolved of any blame. Clearly, under him, we've got to be better. You know, he said himself in his post-match interview, we've got to get better. But I'm looking at the players and I'm asking myself, you know, how many of them are switching off and how many of them really want to be at West Ham United? Look, for example, Mohamed Kudus, he scored, but his goal celebrations and general demeanour this season suggests that he can't wait for the season to end because he knows that he's going to be one of the first out the door once that transfer window opens. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm doing him a disservice, but his body language seems to suggest that. And I think there are others in the team who are thinking much the same. Maybe Alvarez, maybe Paqueta, and maybe one or two others. But that's the blessing in disguise. Now that Potter knows, even if he didn't do so before, that this team needs a massive clear out this summer, I don't think many West Ham fans are going to be too upset for that to happen. It was only recently I was suggesting that I couldn't see a clear out, you know, this summer. You know, I was suggesting that, you know, there'll be a few tweaks, but I can't no way see too many players leaving. But I've changed my mind, you know, and I believe that this is probably the best thing that can happen to West Ham. We're suffering with our results at the moment. We can't seem to be getting ourselves through 90 minutes with a win. And is it just nervousness? Is it just the fear of losing? Or is it something more? Are players switching off? Brighton don't need big name stars to deliver. They're quite happy to create stars at the club, as they did during Potter's reign and as they have done so ever since. And with Potter and McCauley in charge of West Ham now, I think we'll be following suit. And I know there are an awful lot of fans that are saying, don't even give him the chance to do that. But I think that's the aim now. You know, we need to move the big names on, bring in honest, hardworking, decent players who will have that fighting spirit that Brighton had on Saturday. All right, let's deal with some of the basic issues first from the game. You know, the tactics, for example. When Fulkrug was not announced in the starting lineup, many fans and pundits, for that matter, believed that Potter was punishing the player for having spoken out last weekend. I don't really think that's the case, to be honest with you, because if that was the case, I wouldn't have even expected Fulkrug to have been on the bench, let alone being given the second half. So I truly don't think Potter was punishing Fulkrug. As I predicted when I did the preview, I said if we were going to go five at the back, then I couldn't see Potter starting with Fulkrug, and that's how it turned out. It was a tactical decision rather than an emotional one in punishing the player. I just don't think Potter is that fickle to do that. But the fans wanted Fulkrug on the pitch, and a few of the chants made throughout the game made it very clear what the away fans thought of the decisions not to start the German. Now, West Ham away fans are usually a decent barometer, a decent reflection as to where we stand with the manager and the club overall. Now, I believe away fans are usually a more tolerant bunch. But from the get-go, the fans were singing that Fulkrug was right, that we're crap, etc., and that they wanted him on the pitch. A clear message to Potter as to whose side the fans were on. And when away fans seemingly turn on a manager, then you know things could be almost at a breaking point. But I think it's kind of close, but not quite, damn it, then, just yet. So Potter not starting Fulkrug, as I said, for me, I believe that was a tactical decision. Going five at the back was kind of obvious, but the end result was that yet again, we didn't create much in attack. Well, Well, having said that, we hit the bar in the first half with a Souček header, and we did have a few chances. It wasn't all one-way traffic. Now, for me, seeing Souček back made an awful lot of sense, and he was busy getting himself about and making uses of himself and proving yet again that we need a player like that in the team. I'm not saying he's the answer to our midfield, but he certainly had more about him than, with the greatest of respect, Carlos Soler had for the previous two games. But being 1-0 down at half time, we were certain that Potter was going to make changes, and he did. Now, with Baleba playing in a central defensive role rather than in midfield, it actually allowed Potter to make that change in the centre of the park, take James Ward-Prowse off and bring Fulkrug on. It meant that we had more about us. Potter was, as I said in the preview, Potter was going to be concerned about the flanks, Brighton's flanks, and he was going to be concerned about central midfield. I think he saw by half time that central midfield, we kind of held our own. But he still kept the wide players to deal with the flanks. But he knew, because we were holding our own in the middle of the park, he could afford to take a player off in the middle and put a striker on. And he did just that. Now, all of a sudden, with Fulkrug coming on, we changed. It helped. Yet again, as it's been proved several times over, it helped to unlock players like Paqueta, Kudus and Bowen, and we were back in the game. And we were the better team for half an hour, 40 minutes, and we got our reward with 2 goals. But then, with minutes to go in the game, we reverted to type and started to drop deeper and deeper, and allowed Brighton to get back into the game, to have more possession. But it was kind of the next change that Potter made, which almost helped to contribute to Brighton winning the game. Well, partly, certainly getting back into it. On came Soufal for Emerson, and rather than allowing Aaron Wan-Bissaka to go out on the left and keeping Soufal on the right, Potter instructed Soufal to go and play on the left. But I got it. I understood it. And I know he's received criticism for it, but I got it. Reason being, Aaron Wan-Bissaka was doing a job on Mitoma out on the right side, and he didn't want Soufal to face him. But no sooner did we make that change, Hertzler immediately saw that and switched Mitoma over to the other side. So Soufal, in the end, ended up having to face him anyway. And the 2 free headers, which led to Brighton's equaliser, were, for me, more painful than their third goal, because that came from that switch that Hertzler made. All of a sudden, Mitoma was more in the middle. And not only did we allow the ball to be crossed over, I can't remember who it was that headed it back in, but there was a free header on outside of wide, straight into Mitoma, unmarked. We had 3 centre-backs, and Mitoma was unmarked just outside the 6-yard box. Yet again, Max Kilman was woefully sussed out for his inability to defend the space or a player when the ball is drifting up in the air. And before we knew it, they were level. If you look at their second goal, that was the one that disappointed me more. If you look at their second goal, Soufal got dragged in. He was meant to be marking Mitoma. He got dragged in. Who was looking? He should have been out wide for that player who headed it back in. And it was meant to be Kilman that should have been marking Mitoma. Kilman got caught in no man's land. And before you knew it, Soufal was out of position. Kilman was out of position. 2 players with 3 headers, 2-2. And then, the last goal, I guess we should have closed them down for both goals. Their first one and their third one. But how many games do you see where you get 2 really, really good strikes of the ball in the same game? It was cruel. And I know people are going to say, well, we deserve what we get, but I don't know. Walking away with a draw from that game, I would have been all right, fair enough. We should have won, but walking away with a draw, I would have been okay. Losing in the manner that we did, by allowing those players, we did drop deep. Let's be honest. It was Paqueta for the first goal, and it was Bowen for the third one, where we were way, way too deep. We should have been pressing and tried to close them down. But you don't expect 2 strikes like that in the same game. So many fans would say that we deserve to lose because, yet again, we can't just play 35, 40 minutes in a game and expect to get a win. And this is what's happening yet again. First half, we were non existent yet again. Uh, the odd chances, but nothing too great. Second half, we had that purple patch, but then we got nervous and we got deeper, dropped deeper and deeper. Graham Potter's post match interview was sad in a lot of ways. Yes, you could see the pain and the anger he had. He couldn't get his words out. He stated that he didn't want to talk about the positives because, in a direct dig at the journalist, he said that no one cares about the positives and everyone just wants to focus on the negatives. And let's face it, he's absolutely right. So let me try and pick out some of the positives, yeah? We needed a striker on the pitch. We know that. Fulkrug helped change the game. And thank goodness in that respect, Potter did just that. Jared Bowen may not be classed as a great captain, but his endeavour, the sort of fight that he has in his game, as well as Aaron Wan-Bissaka in his game, is the sort of fight that I want to see in every West Ham player, not just the select few. Aaron Wan-Bissaka coming back was a godsend. We just can't do without him. Kudus finally getting a goal might just allow him to have get a few more before the season ends, maybe. But the biggest positive is what I've said, that this result will allow Graham Potter to show a number of West Ham players where the West Ham exit door is this coming summer without him feeling an ounce of guilt or remorse in doing that. The negatives, well, we don't believe in ourselves. We don't play till the final whistle. We sit too far back and allow teams space, all the space in the world. And yet again, we walk away from a game with nothing. The Potter outcries are getting louder. I think we can look at a number of players and maybe suggest that we should be shouting for them to leave, maybe as well as Potter to leave. It's not all on the head coach. Yes, he's the one that's got to manage this. He's the one that's got to galvanize this team and get them together. But it's getting harder to back Potter because of that. As he said after in the post-match interview, we've got a big job on our hands. The anger and frustration he showed in his post-match interview suggests that he won't be taking any prisoners this coming summer. And the task of reshaping the squad, I think for him, has just gotten an awful lot easier.